For the last decade, there has been a ban on drilling within 125 miles off the Florida coast. But is that about to change? Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy wants it to go away or at least allow drilling within 50 miles from the coast. Opponents say the environment still has not fully recovered from the 2010 BP Deepwater Horizon spill, and that nearly 150 oil spills have occurred since. Nationwide, the U.S. Bureau of Land Management says 500,000 barrels of oil have seeped into American waters from leaks that have never been reported. And joining us for more on this debate between energy independence and regulating offshore drilling is Frank Alcock, a professor of political science at New College of Florida and also a former employee of the Department of Energy, and Rod Thompson, who is the president of the Sarasota Republican Club. And we should also note we invited the American Petroleum Institute, which represents many aspects of oil and natural gas industry in the U.S., to join us. They would like to, but said that their Florida representative was not available tonight. And we'll pick up that conversation some other time. But Rod, let me begin with you, because this is not a strictly partisan issue. You have people like Vern Buchanan, who is against allowing offshore drilling closer to the shoreline. But then again, you have Marco Rubio, who has demonstrated, let's say, some flexibility on the issue.
Right. It is not partisan. I think it's more geographic, maybe, in a sense. I mean, I think generally you have seen a pretty closed loop in Florida between Republicans and Democrats on it, and you've seen it in the Republican legislature on the state ban on it, near shore. But federally, you see a unified force generally from Florida. There is some movement by Marco Rubio, and there might be more so. But I think what you see in this particular instance, as much as any other, you see representatives, congressmen, and senators representing their constituents. So if you take a coastal congressman such as Vern Buchanan, his constituents, by and large, are not interested in having offshore oil drilling, although it needs to be separated sometimes and educated for them as far as how far out that is.
Right, but Marco Rubio, yes, he was just reelected to another 6 years, but he represents the entire state of Florida, not just the interior.
That's right. I've seen the polls. I saw what happened in this state when we were having the big fight over both lifting the moratorium and then prior to Deepwater Horizon, the drill baby drill wars, and I've seen Florida numbers, and it's not the political liability statewide that some people think that it is, despite the long-term coalition there, and it is. I would agree with Rod. There's definitely a geographic sense. It's more of a concern in coastal counties, not so at all when you get inland and then statewide. I just don't think too many people have been burned politically for coming out in favor of it over the last few
Because
cycles.
the selling point, correct me if I'm wrong, from Senator Cassidy of Louisiana is that it would bring jobs to Florida. But Frank, I believe you dispute that.
No, it won't. And it depends on where we're talking about, but what the industry, I think, is most after, it's something known as the Destin Dome. And it's about 25 to 50 miles off of the Panhandle, so it's in federal waters that they would like to get at there, and it's a Norphlet formation, so there might be some stuff there. There might be some stuff in the escarpment. However, what would happen if the industry did have access to that? They would probably build spurs to existing pipelines. Most of that hydrocarbon resource would go back to Louisiana for processing. It would incrementally over each year increase some of the productivity in the Gulf of Mexico, but not much. There would not be any, very, very limited amount of jobs.
Rod, briefly make the case for getting rid of this ban, keeping in mind that a lot of people still are horrified by what happened by the Deepwater Horizon just a couple of years ago.
Right. So on the federal ban, so you're talking about well out from the coastline here. Out into the Gulf. And it doesn't seem like, maybe another issue, it doesn't seem like there was a whole lot of lingering environmental impact from even that disaster. And that disaster is such a tiny percentage of all the drilling going on. So some of the pros for it include, and I think maybe the biggest in my opinion, is that it could help diversify the economy. But if you step back from just Florida and look at it nationally, this would be part of the picture that is painted for energy independence. We blocked off Anwar, in which heaven knows what is up there in the winter. And there's just a whole bunch of other areas where we haven't done it.
Obviously, we are just getting started here, folks. We have much more to discuss, but first we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have your weather forecast. Well, welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the status of offshore drilling along Florida's coast and whether it could change under the Trump administration. Our guests tonight are Frank Alcock, the professor of political science at New College of Florida, and Rod Thompson, president of the Sarasota Republican Club. Frank, elections have consequences. Donald Trump ran on energy independence. Is this something that Florida voters care enough to have voted on?
I do not think in this last election voters' stance on drilling,
Was it even on the radar screen?
No. I mean, it folded in maybe to the opinions, the broader opinions that people had on both sides of the aisle. And I think when gas prices were much higher, and this seemed to be a much more salient issue in 08 and 12, it did fade a little bit by the time that the election the election and votes were cast. So it remains on the minds of Floridians. It's an important issue. It's one that they're passionate about, but I don't see in the last few election cycles either anybody riding a wave in either direction or paying a cost for their positions on this issue.
Rod, we were talking during the break.
Could change, though.
Could change because rumor has it our governor, Rick Scott, may be running against Bill Nelson for U.S. Senate in 2 years. And again, the governor has shown some flexibility on the issue. Can either of you see this as a major issue in that campaign?
A major issue? I doubt it as a major issue. The only way it would be really is if essentially both campaigns decided to make it a major issue, made it a sort of a pitched battle the campaigns would be hinged upon. Otherwise, I don't see it being a major issue. I think that it's one of those that requires a balance to be made. I think that voters understand that there's a balance between protecting the environment and our energy costs. And just because costs are low right now doesn't mean they will be in the future. Matter of fact, we can be assured they won't be in the future. So understanding the more energy independence we have, probably a little bit more control we have over our energy costs. On the other hand, with our beaches and with our quality of life, striking a balance for environmental protection is important. That would be played out within that campaign. And neither side is going to cede entirely their ground.
And there are going to be a lot of chips that are going to be played between now and then because Governor Scott is going to have to make some decisions on a statewide basis.
Yeah, so one of the reasons I think that even though it really hasn't been a major issue, the drilling issue, in the last few election cycles, I do think that there is a chance, a strong chance of a major play to change the boundaries along the western coast of Florida, lifting the moratorium. I think it has a reasonable chance of actually happening. It's going to be a priority for Trump, and I think you're going to see Bill Nelson on the front lines. And so voters, people, when they see the name Nelson, it might be attached to this issue. And Rick Scott might hop in there on the side of expanding access to the drilling. And so it might be what voters are seeing over the next couple of years.
I think one way that it could actually become elevated, and it could be pretty quickly elevated, is $4 gas again. Because then that brings everything back. That whole drill baby drill was because the economy was in the tub and gasoline was expensive at the pump. And so that became a rallying cry. If either of those things happen, but certainly if there's a convergence of those two things, then you would definitely have a big push to open up the drilling again.
We don't know what's going to happen in the oil markets, but Frank, looking worldwide, is that even on the table right now?
It doesn't look like that's going to happen, although the people that are supposedly experts have been wrong before. But my understanding of reaction on the part of the industry in terms of big spikes in investment when, for a number of different reasons, again, push prices up. There might have been overinvestment, so I think prices might be going up, but I don't think we're going to get to $4.
Let's get
$3
down,
maybe, but I don't think we're going to see $4.
Let's get down to brass tacks here. Where are the votes in Congress, both the Senate and the House, on this right now? Because obviously the Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. So if Donald Trump calls for energy independence, does he basically have to just send that message to Congress?
He has the votes in the House, and I think he has the votes in the Senate, certainly a majority. Whether or not he has enough votes to overcome a filibuster, that's close. That's going to be what makes it interesting.
Why would you like to see that happen?
For the ban to be lifted? I'd like to see it be really thoroughly explored. And yeah, essentially I would like it to be lifted at least to the point where you could start oil exploration to see what is there and what value there would be.
Frank, I'll give you every opportunity to make your case.
No, the devil will be in the details, though. These arrangements get pretty complicated. If in fact they're going to change the moratorium and the buffer zone, the details, where. Well, a little bit of on the margins is not going to concern me as much as just throwing it.
Where is the middle ground here? Because Americans in general are tired of being beholden to OPEC and what's going on in the Middle East. If there's more strife there, the costs go up. We want to be done with that.
You're never going to be done with that. You're never going to be done with that. It's how it's a globalized oil market. And even if we were not to get a barrel of oil from the Middle East, a pipeline blows up there, there's arbitrage, you have a temporary shortage in supply, our gas prices go up. That's never going to change.
Right, but that would be very temporary in that case. We would still have much more control over our own energy and our own costs for it than we do now.
But a barrel of oil is going to cost the same around the planet. It's just, transportation cost factor, it's the same price.
What is the Florida issue going on right now that also may impact drilling off the Florida shores?
Say that again one more time.
What is the Florida issue? I mean, does the Florida legislature have a role in deciding, independent of...
So we saw this in 2009 and 2010. We don't have our own state moratorium, and that actually almost got lifted. It made it through the House, and the Florida Senate stopped it in 2009, and in 2010, although before session ended, that's when the Deepwater Horizon blowed up. So we could have that. It's not beyond the pale for the Florida legislature to revisit our state moratorium, but that's a very narrow sliver off our entire coastline on the West Coast. Trust me, there's not much.
And I don't think that would have nearly the support, too, that the broader federal lifting of the ban would, because it's a narrow area, it's much closer to the shore, therefore it carries much more risk. So in that balance I was talking about earlier, you have a shift in balance much more towards an environmental and quality of life concern for what you may be getting from it.
Who is talking to who up there? I mean, is Bill Nelson talking to Marco Rubio about these issues, or are these like two senators from Florida who really don't confirm much about unified positions on issues central to Florida?
I think there's a little shadow boxing at the moment as they figure out what their posture is going to be in the upcoming cycle. If they wanted to get on the same page, they certainly can reach out to one another. I don't think they're there yet.
That wouldn't be hard. I think that if Trump really wants this, and he wants it early on in the administration, that I think that a lot of Republicans, including Marco Rubio, are probably going to feel like this is something that maybe they could get behind.
And we have less than a minute left, but what bearing does who President-elect Trump is appointing as Secretary of the Interior or Energy have on this process?
There'll just be more executive support, I think, for lifting. So to the extent that, and you saw this dance between the Obama administration, certainly, and Congress, which was, even though they couldn't get past the filibuster, there, I think they were favorably disposed towards increasing access. Obama flirted with it. Right now, you can have an administration that definitely wants to open up access nationwide. Against Nelson and his filibuster is really the only thing standing in the way. We
have to take another quick break, but when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests, plus what some of our viewers are saying about an ordinance targeting puppy mills. So stay with us.